So I'm hoping everyone can hear me. Can we please do a sound check? Please write down in your chat boxes if you can hear me, and we can proceed. Yes, no, everyone? Can everyone hear me? Yes? All right. Let's begin. Welcome to the F8 mock debrief. Let's begin by first going through the answers to the multiple task questions that you got in your mock. So question number 1 was a fairly simple question which asked, as the audit manager has asked you to review the full list of trade payables and select balances on which supplier statement reconciliations will be performed. Which of the following should you select for testing? Remember, over here, the key was to identify that you had to perform supplier statement reconciliations. So you had to read the requirement carefully and then choose your answer. Which of the following items should you test? Another thing from this scenario that you should have identified was that this scenario particularly asked you to focus on the completeness of payables. In any case, if you had identified this, the answer would have been fairly simple. You could not have chosen a major supplier where statements agree to the ledger, because that is what you're going to do. You're going to be reconciling the supplier statements with the ledger. The correct answer was suppliers with material balances at year end, suppliers which have a high volume of business with Poppy Company, and major suppliers with nil balance at year end. The correct answer to this question was B. Since you were supposed to perform supplier statement reconciliations, you would not have chosen major suppliers where statements agreed to the ledger. The correct answer to this question was 1, 2, and 3. Moving on. The second question was, which of the following audit procedures should be performed in relation to balance with Lilly Company to determine if payable balance is understated? If you scroll back, the difference in the balance with Lilly Company was for $70,000. The difference was caused by an invoice that was dated 28th June 2006 for $70,000, which was not recorded in financial statements until after the year end. The payables clerk has advised the audit team that the invoice was not received until 2nd of July 2006. Now we know that the purchase entry should have been booked when risks and rewards would have been transferred. And you know that risks and rewards are transferred on the date that GRN is prepared or on the date when goods are received by the company. If you look at the options given, the first is inspect the goods received note to determine when the goods were received, because that is when the entry should have been booked. So that's the date of the entry. The correct answer was A. Inspect the purchase order to confirm it is dated before year end. That would not have mattered because that does not indicate when the purchase entry should have been booked in the records. Review post year end cash book for evidence of payment of the invoice. The payment does not matter. You are checking when liability had to be recorded. Hence, the payment would not have mattered. Send a confirmation request to Lilly Company to confirm the outstanding balance, and Lilly would have confirmed 175, and the problem remains the same. The correct answer would have been A. Inspect the goods received note for the invoice to determine when the goods were received, because that's when the entry should have been booked. Let's move on to the next question. Which of the following procedures should be carried out to confirm the balance owing to Carnation Company? Remember, if you scroll back upwards, there was a difference with Carnation Company as well. A difference of exactly $20,000. The difference in the balance is due to an invoice which was under dispute due to faulty goods which were returned on the 29th of June. All right, if we go back to the question, review post-year-end credit notes for evidence of acceptance of return. You need to know when the return was accepted by the supplier. So this is a correct statement. Inspect pre-year-end goods return note in respect to the item sent back to the supplier, because you need to know when the goods were returned. Because if they were in fact returned before year end, then our balance or our client's balance is correct. Inspect post-year-end cash book for evidence of the amount that has been settled that has nothing to do with the dispute. The dispute is not about the payment at all. Hence, any procedure that is applicable on the payment is irrelevant. The correct answer is C, 1 and 2. When goods were returned and when were they accepted by the supplier? Because that is the amount under question and that is the cause of dispute. Now, question number 4 was fairly simple for those who read it correctly and for those who know their sampling concepts and the concept of extrapolation. Can anyone tell me what the correct answer to this question is? 4. So, in your chat boxes, I want to know what options did you think were correct for question number 4? Everyone in your chat boxes, I need to know that you guys are listening and that you guys can hear me. All right, do we have answers? Come on, I want consensus. What is everyone saying? So one says A, another one says B. Come on, the rest of you, did you tick the option? The question is the audit manager. Now, this question is a trick question. Remember, take 2 minutes to read the question. Everyone, read the question. Tell me, what do you think is the right answer? The audit manager has asked you to review the results of some statistical sampling testing. Remember, the key over here is statistical sampling, which means that you can extrapolate. Extrapolation does not work in non-statistical sampling, which resulted in 20% of the payable balance being tested. The testing results indicate that there is a $45,000 error in the sample, $20,000 which is due to invoices not being recorded in the correct period as a result of weak controls. And additionally, there's a one-off error of $25,000 which was made by a temporary clerk. Now, you know that the error made due to weak controls should be extrapolated. A one-off error cannot be extrapolated by the auditors. Why? Because a one-off error is unlikely to affect the entire population. Entire population. However, $20,000 of errors which are due to weak controls are likely to affect the entire population. Hence, 20,000 should be extrapolated and can be extrapolated simply because this is statistical sampling. The first is the error is immaterial and therefore no further work is required. This is incorrect. You can't decide whether this is material or immaterial until you have extrapolated. The effect of the control error should be projected across the entire population. This is the correct answer. Poppy Company should be asked to adjust the payables figure by $45,000. This is incorrect because this is something that needs to be reviewed further. A different sample should be selected as these results are not reflective of the population. You cannot decide on this until you're given further information on how the sample was selected. Since sample was selected through statistical sampling, there are lower chances of bias. Hence, the sample is most likely to be correct. The correct answer to this question was B. Next. To help improve audit efficiency, Weiler and Company is considering introducing the use of computer-assisted audit techniques for some audits. You have been asked to consider how CATs can be used during the audit of Puppy Company. Which of the following is an example of using test data? Remember, here the keyword is test data for payables testing. Now you know that CATs can be used through two methods. Test data, which is testing through dummy transactions or fake information, or audit software, which is the auditor's software for facilitating and improving efficiency of audit. Now, if you look at the first option, selecting a sample of supplier balances for testing using monetary unit sampling, that is an example of audit software, which is used to help the auditor in choosing a sample, filtering information, sorting information, or recalculating figures. Recalculating the aging of trade payables to identify balances which may be in dispute, that is also an example of audit software. Calculation of trade payables days to use in analytical procedures, that is also an example of audit software. Inputting dummy purchase invoices, and you should stop here because this is an example of test data. D was the correct option because test data means using fake or dummy transactions. Remember that. If you know your concepts clearly, and if you know details of your concepts, these should have been easy to answer. This was a relatively easy question. All right, let's move to the next one. This is a question that tests your corporate governance knowledge, which is also a topic in your syllabus. All right. Let's move further. Okay. So the next question is, which of the following should be included in a formal document regarding the responsibilities of the audit committee? All right. Let's go through this. Okay, I can see that there are some typing issues here. We're going to try and get through these as efficiently as possible. All right, so the first is to monitor and review the effectiveness of the newly established internal audit function. You know that this is one of the responsibilities of the audit committee. The second is to evaluate the balance of skills, experience, and independence of the board members. This is the responsibility of the nomination committee, not the audit committee. To take responsibility for the appointment and removal of the external auditors. Remember, external auditors are appointed and removed by shareholders rather than the audit committee. To monitor and review the effectiveness of internal financial controls established by the company. This is also the responsibility of the audit committee. The correct option was B. All right, I'm going to stop here and I'm going to discuss one of the most effective techniques of answering multiple choice questions or multiple task questions. Often students think that they've been given options and statements in multiple choice questions to give them the ease of answering. Remember that you are given options to confuse you in the exam. What you should do in the exam is read your case scenario, highlight the important things, and without having read the question, without having read the options, these options, Just read this part of the question, only this part of the question, and try and answer it without looking at the options. This is what I'm constantly doing through this debrief. What I'm trying to do is get you to read the question and these statements without even looking at the options. Try and answer as many questions like this as possible. And when you have done this, what I have done here, written here, then you proceed to look at the options and take the right option according to what you have thought about of the question. Remember, try and answer as many questions as possible without even looking at the options. Any questions about how to answer multiple choice questions? Any questions? Exactly. Muzammil, there will always be some options which are vague. You will always be given at least two options which are very, very close together. All right, and there will be distractors as well. What you need to do is you need to read the question without even looking at the options, and you need to answer as many questions as possible without looking at the options. The options are there to confuse you. So what you do is you answer questions without looking at the options and then take the right option. All right, let's, as an example, do the next question. Okay, so indicate by marking on the relevant row in the table below which of the following option correctly describes the deficiency related to NED remuneration and make a valid recommendation for improvement. Now, everyone, don't look at these options. Do not look at these options. Go back above and let's look at what the problem is. The company currently has 3 non-executive directors on the board who are paid a fee which changes annually depending on company performance. Now, you know that threatens NED independence, all right? Independence. You also need to know that NEDs need to be paid a fixed fee based on number of meetings attended. Remember that. Now, you should have thought of that. You should have jotted it down on the scenario when you were reading the scenario. The fact that non-executive directors were being paid based on the company's performance threatens their independence. Non-executive directors are not paid based on company's annual performance. They are paid based on the number of meetings attended. Now let's get back to the question. Without looking at the options, we have tried to answer the question. Now let's look at the options. If you move further down. Hold on. All right. So we had to tick the row which correctly made a valid recommendation for improvement. Let's look at that. NEDs should be remunerated based on the same basis as executive team. This is incorrect. If they were paid based on the same basis as the executive team, they wouldn't be independent. NED's remuneration should be tied to profit targets. This is incorrect as well. They are supposed to be paid based on the number of meetings attended. The next is NED remuneration should be set based on the amount of time committed. This is correct. NED's remuneration should be linked to individual performance. That is incorrect as well. Third row was the correct answer. Without looking at the options, we tried and answered as many questions as possible. Any questions? I'm going to stop and take questions. Hold on. All right. Sarah, the revision notes that have been uploaded here, there are two handouts that have been uploaded today. Everyone needs to listen to this carefully. Sarah and everyone else. There are 2 handouts uploaded today. If you look at the handout section, there are scans, F8 revision notes. If you open these, there should be a corporate governance section which clearly tells you about this theory. So non-executive directors, and Sarah, since I have told you this, you should jot it down and you should remember this for the exam. The non-executive directors are only allowed to be paid based on the number of meetings attended. Non-executive directors cannot be paid in the exact same fashion as executive directors because they're required to be independent. Sheroz, to answer your question, absolutely, they are more than enough. If you have read, and I am going to put this out, and remember that I'm an auditor by profession, I would never give guarantees. But if there is one thing that I can guarantee is, Sheroz, that if you've read each and every word of the revision notes that have been uploaded, and if you have done at least, and I'm saying at least, 8 to 10 of ACCA's past exam papers, F8 past exam papers, then you have a very, very good chance of passing the actual exam. Your next question would probably be, do I still have time? And the answer is yes. You still have time to go through the entire revision notes and do at least 8 to 10 of past exam attempts in order to pass the exam. Sheroz, I hope that answers your questions. And Sarah, I hope that I've answered your question as well. All right. No problem. Okay. Answer as many questions as possible without looking at the options. All right. Let's move forward. Which of the following statements is correct? Now, this is the kind of question where you would have to read the statements because we're trying to find the correct statement. The head of internal audit should report to finance director. This is wrong. The head of internal audit should report to the audit committee in order to maintain independence of the internal audit function and not the finance director. Paul should be appointed as the head of internal audit. All right, let's go back and see who Paul is. Okay, so Paul Belling over here is a consultant who helps design and implement the company's current control system. If he was hired as the head of internal audit, this would constitute the self-review thread. He would be reviewing the same controls that he helped design and implement. Maria should be the head of internal audit. So the second statement is incorrect as well, which means if you didn't even read the third statement, automatically that would be correct. This is incorrect because if Paul was hired as the head of internal audit, that would constitute a self-review threat. The audit team requires more senior staff with audit experience, which is correct, because that would be almost always correct for any audit team. All right, let's move forward. So I'm going to not look at the requirements, just read this part. All right, everyone, read this part. The board has started to compile a list of tasks for the internal audit department to carry out once it is up and running. It has been agreed that the first assignment to be completed will be for the internal audit to review sister companies' process over capital expenditure to verify if the right items are purchased at an appropriate time and competitive price. This talks about economy, the competitive price, at the right time, efficiency, and the right items, which is effectiveness. You know, these are the 3 E's of value for money. If you look at the options, it mentions value for money, and that is the correct option, option A. Always remember, the trick to answering a multiple choice question is reading the case scenario as carefully as possible and trying to answer as many questions without having to look at the options. Do you have any questions? All right. Next, when deciding on the role of the internal audit department in undertaking operational audits, which of the following should the team not be involved in? Now, this is also a question that requires some degree of reading the options. Observing procedures carried out by the sister company staff. This is correct because we do observe processes. Reperforming procedures documented in the procedures manual. That would be correct as well. We do reperform procedures. Next, designing and implementing internal control procedures to address deficiencies. Reporting findings directly to the board of directors. Can anyone tell me what the correct answer to this question is? Which of the following should the team not be involved in? Can anyone tell me what the correct option is? D and C? No, actually, internal audit does report directly to the board of directors, as in audit committee, which is a subcommittee of the board. C is the correct option, designing and implementing internal control procedures to address deficiencies. Remember, it is our job as auditors, internal or external, to report on deficiencies, provide recommendations, but designing and implementing internal control procedures is not our job. This will always be the management's job. I want you guys to write this down in your notes. Auditors, any kind of auditors, internal or external, are not required to design and implement internal control procedures. You should not have had to read the entire option. You only had to read the first 3 words, designing and implementing, to know that this was wrong. This cannot be done by any auditor, internal or external. This cannot be done. All right, I'm going to go to the question section. Yes, audit committee is included, Ramesh, in the board of directors because it is a subcommittee of the board. It also enhances the risk of self-review, isn't it? Yes, Muzammil, that is correct as well. All right. Next question. You are an audit manager of MNN Company and are finalizing the audit of financial statements of Open Company. All right. So this has certain ratios that you've been given, certain additional information that you've been given. Unfortunately, since I cannot see the entire statement, let me first all right, now I can see the entire statements. Okay. Let's look at the first question. Okay. As a part of the going concern assessment, some additional issues have been noted on the audit file. Now, this is a question that has almost nothing to do with the scenario that has been given above. Which 2 of the following issues could individually cast doubt over the going concern assumption for Oak and Company? Can anyone tell me what the correct answer is to this question? Everyone, please take 2 minutes to read this question. Tell me what the correct option is. You have 2 minutes to read the question and answer. Come on, I want everyone to participate, not just the students who are answering right now. Please, I want everyone to participate. Which do you think are the correct options to answer this question? Everyone. Meanwhile, I'm just going to go through the questions. Come on, everyone. I only have 3 answers so far. Unfortunately, so far, none of them have been correct. You have to choose two. So Muhammad, Mursaleen, I'm guessing, and Sarah, you have to choose two. Khalid, please go back. Read the requirement. It says two. Choose two statements. Come on, everyone. I want everyone to type. Because so far, no one has chosen the correct options. All right. So I'm glad that everyone is participating. That's the best. Okay, let's go through the options. So a number of personnel in the purchasing department left during the year and have not been replaced. Remember, a number of personnel is not key staff. This is not key staff. So a number of personnel leaving in the purchase department cannot affect going concern unless you've been told that that is key staff. If not key staff, then no impact on going concern. This can't be one of the options. A major supplier to Oak Company has just gone out of business with a number of unfulfilled orders, which means production will be halted. Hence, sales will be affected. How will we know? Because of the word a major supplier with unfulfilled orders. So this will be in the correct options. A new product, which is due to account for 30% of revenue, which is a hefty amount, has proven to be unsuccessful, which means inventory will be now unsaleable. Also, revenue will also be affected. So two important accounts will be affected, inventory and revenue. This will also affect going concern. A litigation claim has been raised against Oak Company after the year end with potential damages totaling 3% of this year's profit. You know that 3% is immaterial because materiality benchmarks are 5 to 10% of profit before tax. So the correct options were B and C. Did anyone get these right? Did anyone get these right? B and C. Anyone? Arsalan Ramiz got them right. Excellent. Well done. All right. So B and C were the correct options. All right. Let's move further down. I have no idea what has happened. Okay. Since technology and I don't get along very well, I may have done something to affect the formatting. Apologies for that in advance. All right. So the next is, as a part of your review of the final analytical procedures, you compare the results to the following comments on the audit file. Now, listen to this carefully. I want everyone to pay attention. I'm going to be answering this question without looking at the requirements. Which of the above comments are inconsistent? Always, when you get these kinds of words in your requirements, you have to underline them, you have to highlight them in the exam with the results of the final analytical procedures. All right. The first is, the company has increased the sales price charged to the customers while maintaining costs at a level comparable to 2005. You know that when sales prices are increased, when costs remain the same, margins should increase. Let's see. Are they increasing? No. Margins are actually decreasing, which means this statement is inconsistent. This statement is inconsistent. Let's read the second one. The company has become more reliant on its overdraft facility during the year. All right. I am guessing that the screen is stuck. Just let me figure this out in a minute. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Everyone? Can everyone see my screen? Can everyone see my screen? All right. Perfect. Okay. So the first statement was the company has increased sales prices charged to the customers while maintaining costs at a level comparable to 2005. If you look at this comment, margins should have increased. But when you go back to the scenario, margins have decreased. This statement is inconsistent. The second, the company has become more reliant on its overdraft facility during the year. If the company was more reliant on its overdraft facility, liquidity should decrease. If overdraft increases, liquidity should decrease. Let's look at the scenario. Liquidity is, in fact, decreasing. Liquidity liquidity is decreasing, which means this statement is consistent. This can't be in the correct option. This is consistent. Due to cash restrictions, the company has encountered delays in paying suppliers. If there have been delays in paying suppliers, payable days would have increased. Let's look at the indicators. And payable days are increasing. This is also consistent with the statement. All right, let's look at the last. At the year-end inventory count, a lower level of slow-moving inventory was noted. If there was a lower level of slow-moving inventory, inventory was sold quickly. This means that the inventory was sold quickly. If inventory was sold quickly, inventory days should have decreased. Let's look at the indicators. And inventory days are increasing, which means this statement is also inconsistent with the results. 1 and 4. The correct option was B. 1 and 4. Both of these statements are inconsistent with the ratios that the auditors have calculated. Next. Which of the following procedures would provide the most reliable audit evidence in relation to new business won post year end? So, this is with reference to this statement, which says that, all right, let me go further. This statement, Oak Company lost a major customer, Beach Company, in May 2006, but new business has been won post year end, which has mitigated the impact of the loss of Beach and Company. Now, the auditor needs to gather evidence on new business won. Remember, now I'm going to revise something with you. When you're talking about reliability of audit evidence, the most reliable audit evidence is evidence gathered by auditor himself or herself. Then, and this is the most reliable, the second most reliable form of audit evidence is evidence generated from a third party. The third most reliable audit evidence is evidence provided by management only if controls are strong. Remember this hierarchy. The most reliable form of audit evidence is evidence gathered by the auditor himself. The second most reliable form of audit evidence is evidence generated from a third party. And the third most reliable form of audit evidence is provided by management if controls are strong. Look at the first statement. Review of post-year-end sales orders from the new customer. This is an audit evidence generated by the auditor himself, because this is being reviewed by the auditor himself, a review of post-year-end sales orders from a new customer. Also, since sales orders are generated from a third party, the customer, these are going to be reliable. Look at the second. Inspect email correspondence between the sales director of Oak & Company and the new customer. This evidence is provided by the management. Obtain a written representation confirming level of business agreed with the new customer. Again, written representation will be provided by the management. A review of board minutes, and this is also provided by the management, as in the board of directors. The correct option was A, which would provide the most reliable audit evidence in relation to new business won post year end. A review of post year end sales orders. Questions? All right. The next question is, which keeps disappearing. All right. The next question is, the initial going concern assessment conducted by management of Oak Company covers the period to 30th November 2006. The year end is May 2006. So from May to November, June, July, August, September, October, November, this is 6 months. Can anyone tell me what is the period that should be covered by the going concern assessment? Can anyone tell me what is the period that should be covered by the going concern assessment? Is anyone answering? Does anyone know? What is the period that should be covered by our going concern assessment? From year end till audit report? No, Zainab, that's not the correct answer. This is guided by a standard. And the standard is that the auditor should make a going concern assessment for the next year, 12 months for the next year. So for the upcoming 1 year or 12 months. If you knew this theory, then you don't even have to look at the options. You know that the going concern assessment should cover the period up until 30th May 2007, 1 year from the year end. Correct option was C. Your current assessment covers, or the management's current assessment covers 6 months till November. It should cover 12 months till 30th May 2007. All right. Next. The audit engagement partner has concluded that the disclosure included in financial statements in relation to loan negotiations is adequate. Now you should stop here and think that the opinion should then be, if the disclosure was adequate, the opinion should be unmodified. If disclosure was adequate, there should be no reason to modify the audit opinion. Remember, the point to remember over here is, if there are no errors in financial statements, then there should be no reason to modify the audit opinion. Opinion will only be modified if the management has not given appropriate disclosures regarding going concern in financial statements. Since you've already been told that the disclosure is appropriate, opinion would be unmodified. Additionally, the audit partner has commented that disclosure is fundamental to the user's understanding of financial statements, which means opinion would be unmodified. But if going concern is uncertain, an additional paragraph needs to be added, which would be MURGC, material uncertainty regarding going concern. So since opinion needs to be unmodified, it is either going to be C or D. A and B can't be correct options. Now let's look at the paragraphs. You know that the emphasis of matter paragraph is never used to highlight uncertainty regarding going concern. The correct option was C, opinion unmodified, with a material uncertainty regarding going concern paragraph. If you had answered these questions correctly, I need you guys to make an assessment of how many of you got majority questions right in the objective test questions. How many of you got the majority questions right in the multiple choice questions? 4 wrong here. In this scenario, don't lose heart. All right, listen to this carefully. If you're getting the wrong answers now, then that's fine. It is absolutely fine. Often students in my own class ask me, what can they do to ensure that they are answering multiple choice questions or multiple task questions correctly in the exam? Remember that you do not need to practice a lot of multiple choice questions, or you do not need to practice a lot of multiple task questions in order to get them right in the exam. In order to get these right in the final exam, you need to ensure that you have in-depth knowledge of the text. In-depth knowledge of the text is absolutely mandatory to get the right answers in your exam. Even if you have not practiced them enough, what you need to do is read each and every word of your textbook, whatever textbook that you're using, whatever notes that you're using, attentively. You have to read each and every word. Particularly for those students who are going to be following the revision notes that have been uploaded, these revision notes are already extremely concise. You cannot afford to miss even a single word from these revision notes when you're covering them for the exam. Only then can these be used for preparation of your final exam. You need to have in-depth knowledge of text. So for example, those students who don't know responsibilities of audit committees, students who don't know how long or the period that should be covered by going concern assessment cannot answer these questions correctly. In order to answer these questions correctly, you need to have in-depth knowledge of the text. The best way to answer multiple choice questions or multiple task questions in your exam would be to first read all of the requirements, not the options, these requirements, and know what is being asked. Then go back to your scenario and then read the scenario carefully once. Read it extremely carefully. Make notes on the scratch pad or make notes on the question paper. Highlight important lines. Once you've read the question statements and the case scenario, then you start tackling each multiple choice question or each multiple task question separately, individually, answer every question, and then move on. One of the worst things that you can do is leave questions, especially multiple choice questions, unanswered in your exam. Answer each and every question. If you're taking a computer-based examination, then your task is easy, because in computer-based examination, the computer will highlight questions that you have not answered at the end if you look at the navigator option. If you're taking the manual exam, then you have to flip through your answers to see which requirements you have not answered, and please answer each and every requirement. So the trick to answering multiple choice questions is reading the question statements first, then go on to read the case scenario. When you're reading the case scenario, make notes while you're reading the case scenario, underline, highlight, and then tackle each question separately. I hope you all know how to prepare for and answer objective test questions. Yes, no, so that we can move forward to constructive response questions. Does everyone know how to prepare for and answer objective test questions? Yes, no? Not this mock, Khalid, but this mock is available here, and I am assuming that you will be sent the answers once we're done. Yes, you will. You will have the answers, Khalid. Any questions with regards to objective test questions? Any questions so that we can move forward and discuss constructive response questions? Anyone? All right, I'm going to move on. So the next is the first constructive response question. All right, so I'm going to warn you guys in advance and tell you that I'm not going to be discussing the detailed constructive response answers here because you are going to be emailed those anyway. What I'm going to be discussing is the technique to answering constructive response questions. So I'm going to be discussing the technique. The technical answers to these questions will be emailed to you once we are done. All right. So the question number 16 is based on control deficiencies. I'm just reading the requirement. And everyone, I need you guys to focus on this. The fact that you have to, when you're answering constructive response questions, you must read the case scenario after you have read the requirements. You must read the requirements before you read the case scenario. This is absolutely mandatory. Read the requirements and then go on to read the case scenario. So the requirement that we are going to be focusing on is this. Identify and explain 5 deficiencies. Recommend a control to address each of these deficiencies. Describe a test of control to the auditor should perform to assess if each of these controls, if implemented, is operating effectively. Now, a lot of students ask how these questions are answered. Let me open a separate file here in order to make scribbles. All right. When you're answering such questions, remember you must always answer in 3 columns. So you will make 3 columns. You will insert a table, make 3 columns. The first for deficiency, the second for recommendation, and the third for the test of control. Now, very often students don't know how to write this. They're comfortable with this. They're comfortable with the recommendations. They have no idea how to formulate a test of controls. So, can anyone tell me, can I have a vote? Can anyone tell me how many of you find writing TOCs the hardest part of such questions? So, just Muzammil, that's it? No one else has a problem in TOCs? So that way I can skip, yeah? Telling you how to write TOCs? Everyone. All right, let's discuss what are you going to do for TOCs. Okay, so for deficiencies, first, the best thing that you can do for a deficiency is copy lines exactly from the case to the answer. What you have to do is copy lines from the case to the answer. That's number 1. That should be the first line of your deficiency. The second should be discuss the impact, and this is important, discuss the impact of deficiency on the business. Always. And that's it. You have to write a minimum of 2 lines, in your answers when answering such question. When you're writing down deficiencies, you have to copy the lines exactly, verbatim, word for word, from the case onto your answer. That's called identification. Then discuss the impact of the deficiency on the business. Now, your recommendation should be 1 line to tell what a perfect control would be. Now, your TOC should also be 1 line. This 1 line should be based on your recommendation. The trick to doing this is Ignore deficiency when you're writing TOC. For the TOC, only focus on recommendation, ignore the deficiency altogether. Just ignore it. You don't even want to look at it. So when you're writing down the TOC, only focus on the recommendation. Pick up words from your recommendation, and your TOC should have 3 components. This one line should have 3 components. A verb, it should start with an action. A what are you checking, and a why. Why are you checking it? Verb, what, why. So a verb would be check the purchase invoice to ensure that it is authorized by senior management. Full stop. Verb being check, what being the purchase invoice, why being to ensure that it is authorized. Remember, this is the technique to answering a deficiency question correctly. When you're writing down the deficiency, copy lines from the case onto your answer. Discuss the impact of the deficiency on the business. For recommendation, write down in one line what a perfect control would be. And then for the TOC, write down one line based on your recommendation. Ignore the deficiency for TOC. Your TOC should start with a verb. It could be any verb. Review, inspect, observe, check, any. Investigate. It should mention what you're checking, and it should mention why you're checking it. Let's do one example. All right. Let's do one easy example from the case. All right. Deficiency, recommendation, and a TOC. All right. Let's go back to the question. Moving upward. All right. The easiest of this was that orders above $1,000 are authorized from a purchase director. This is a deficiency. All right. So what we are going to do is we're going to copy this line onto our answer. Orders above $1,000 require authorization from the purchase director. Full stop. This line I have copied exactly from the case. This is line number 1. Now, I'm going to discuss the impact on the business in line number 2. So this was line number 1. You don't have to number it in the exam. I'm numbering it to show you. Please don't number your lines in your answer in your exam. I'm only numbering them to show you what I'm trying to say or to show you the technique. All right. In the second line, I'm going to be discussing the impact. So orders below 1,000 could have errors that would lead to wrong quantity or quality being accepted by the business. You could write more than one line in order to mention the impact on the business, and that's fine. I said minimum one line. You can write more than one line to actually discuss the impact on the business. Remember, quality over quantity always. So you should ensure quality of your answer and not focus on the quantity. You must write at least one line to mention the impact on the business. But if you want to write more than one line, that is really good. You should be able to discuss the impact on the business. Often, students only identify the deficiency and fail to discuss the impact. So this approach is for them to make them focus on the fact that if they've written only one line to identify the deficiency, that is insufficient, that is incorrect. You must mention the impact on the business. Once you've done this, you write down the recommendation in one line, and that would be all purchase orders regardless of amount should be authorized by purchase director. Question?
Do we have to look with financial statements all the time?
No. For control deficiencies, you don't have to link with financial statements. For control deficiencies, you have to link them with the business, impact on the business. All right. Now we come to TOC. I want you guys all to pay attention. For TOC, I'm going to ignore the deficiency. I'm going to focus on this, the recommendation. Remember, to write the TOC, ignore the deficiency, focus on the recommendation. Inspect, this is your work, a sample of purchase orders to ensure that they are reviewed and authorized by purchase director. Now, the best part about the TOCs and the easiest part about the TOCs is you can check them yourself. How? All right. Look at this. Inspect being the verb, a sample of purchase orders being the what, to ensure that they are reviewed and authorized being the why. Verb, what, why. And you move on. That's it. Easy. Writing TOCs down should be very, very easy if you know exactly what to write. Remember, a test of control is an audit procedure and would normally be in one line. One line. If this line is written correctly, you should be able to get 1 mark for 1 line. How are you going to write a TOC? You're going to write the sentence down in 3 separate components: a verb, a what, and a why. Now, I'm going to give you an easy option as well. Listen to this carefully. For those students who can't mention a verb or who can't think of a verb in the exam, because that happens as well. So that will sometimes happen that you cannot think of a verb to start the sentence with. If you can't think of a verb, ideally you should start with a verb. But if you cannot think of a verb, start with the words the auditor should. The auditor should. And then go on to mention should do what and why. Should do what and why. Remember, your TOC will more ideally be written, or in most cases be written, in 1 line. It should have 3 components: a verb, a what, and a why. If you can't think of a verb, an action to start your sentence with, please start with the words the auditor should. For your TOC, focus on your recommendation, ignore the deficiency altogether. For your deficiency, copy words from the case scenario first, then mention the impact on the business. Notice that I'm saying on the business, and then write down your recommendation. Can everyone tell me, do you understand the technique to answering a control deficiency question? Come on, guys. I need to know. Zainab, yes. Muzamil, yes. You're most welcome. I want everyone to tell me if they understand. So listen, I call this my deficiency recommendation technique, the 1, 2, 3 technique, right? So 3 lines is the maximum that you're going to write for a deficiency. The minimum is 2 lines. Remember, for your deficiency, line number 1 will always be copied from the case. Always be copied from the case. Line number 2 should mention the impact of the deficiency on the business. Please, please don't miss this in your exam, because if you have not mentioned the impact on the business, you won't get marks. Don't lose marks. All right. So then you will write your recommendation in 1 line, what should be done, what a perfect control looks like. And then you are going to go on and write your test of control, which should be written in 1 line, and your 1 line should have 3 components. And I love repeating this to my students in class as well, because I want this to be ringing in their minds every time they write their audit procedure. Your audit procedure should start with a verb. It should tell the examiner what you're checking. It should tell the examiner why you're checking it. If you've missed the why, your audit procedure is wrong. If you've missed the what, your audit procedure is wrong. In case you can't think of the correct verb to start with, you have an easy option for those who can't think of that, because often you get nervous. Start your sentence with the auditor should, in case you don't remember what verb you should start with. All right? Okay. Let's take another easy option. Let's do one more deficiency and then move on. All right. I'm just going to go on to the next page. I've scribbled enough on this. You should be able to see what I'm doing. All right. Let's go on to the question. Okay. Another is supplier statements, supplier reconciliation statements are no longer performed. All right. Supply statement reconciliations are no longer performed. I'm just going to give a heading again. So there's going to be a deficiency. There's going to be a recommendation. And there's going to be a TOC. So for deficiencies, the first line is going to be copied from the case scenario. So supplier statement reconciliations are no longer performed. Remember, and notice that I have copied exactly from the case scenario. That's what you have to do. This is the easiest part, right? Copying from the case scenario. Do it, all right? In the exam, you have to do it in the exam. The second would be errors would not be identified and may lead to disputes with suppliers at year end and misstatements in payable balances. So, do you have to write misstatements in payable balances? Well, no, not necessarily. If you've mentioned disputes with suppliers, that should be sufficient as well. So, do you have to mention this? No, but I want to mention it to make my case stronger, to make my deficiency stronger. I stop writing my deficiency here. That's it. That's all I want to write. And is this sufficient? Yes, it is more than enough. Recommendation. Supplier statement reconciliations should be performed and reviewed on a monthly basis. That's it. Now, in order to write TOC, you know what you have to do. You have to ignore the deficiency, focus on the recommendation to write the TOC. Ignore the deficiency altogether, focus on the recommendation. All right, I'm going to write it in a separate thing. Obtain and review all right, a sample of supplier statement reconciliations to verify that they are prepared and reviewed regularly. All right. The best part about this is you can check this yourself. The verbs being obtain and review. Exactly what? A sample of supplier statement reconciliation. Why? To verify that they are prepared and reviewed regularly. A verb, a what, and a why. Do you all know how to tackle a control deficiency and a TOC question in the exam now? Everyone, clear? Everyone, I'm looking for answers. Perfect, Ramesh. If it is clear, then you should be focusing on this because it is highly likely that this will be tested in the exam. Your examiner likes testing areas which are poorly managed by students in exams. So this is an area that is very often tested because it is normally not very well attempted by students in the exam. If you do understand this, well, that's perfect. All right. If you look at the other requirements, they're fairly simple and straightforward. For example, and you will be given the answers to this, explain the safeguards which Haley and company should implement to ensure that identified conflict of interest is properly managed. Now, this is something that you must have gone through during the sessions. Since there's a conflict of interest, the first safeguard that can be employed is a separate team. Also, Chinese walls to prevent exchange of information, regular review of work performed for both the companies, and full disclosure. If you want to further review this, remember these are given in your revision notes. They're given in your revision notes. All right. What I want to discuss with you is on the next question as well. So the next question is based on the dreaded substantive procedures. So substantive procedures on trade payables, substantives on bank overdrafts and saving accounts, directors' remuneration. All right. So most students find this difficult as well, writing substantive procedures. All right. So how do you write these in the exam? Can anyone tell me how to write a substantive procedure? Normally, what is the mark split? If you've been given 4 marks, how many substantive procedures should you write? For example, the first requirement, let's look at A. Describe substantive procedures the auditor should perform to obtain a sufficient appropriate audit evidence in relation to completeness of airsoft companies, trade payables, and accruals. Can anyone tell me how many audit procedures should you write? How many audit procedures? Come on, people, start answering. We don't have a lot of stuff to cover. So, always remember, Sterish is correct. 4 procedures. So for 4 marks, you should be able to write at least 4 procedures in your answer. You can write more than 4 in case you're unsure about one or two of your procedures. And if you're writing more than 4, remember the examiner is going to read them all and answer the ones that are and mark the ones that are correct. So the idea that she's only going to be reading the first 4 is wrong. She's going to be reading them all and marking only those which she feels are correct. All right. So for procedures, since these are also auditor's procedures, remember any procedure that will be written that is not related to completeness will not be marked. So you can't write procedures on existence or valuation or rights and obligations, because these procedures have to be specifically on the completeness of payables. Again, this is an answer that will be given to you, that will be emailed to you. What I want to discuss is the technique of writing a substantive procedure. All right. So how do you write a substantive procedure in your exam? Exactly the way you wrote a TOC. Remember, a substantive procedure will always have 3 parts. A substantive procedure should start with a verb. It should tell you what you're checking. It should tell you why you're checking it. Start with a verb and action. In what you must mention the document or the process. In why you must mention the purpose of your procedure. If, easy option, if you can't remember what the purpose is, just write down the assertion that you're trying to test in why, and that is going to be correct. It is going to be correct. Listen to this carefully. Your substantive procedure will always be written in one sentence. It should be one sentence. Your sentence should have 3 components. Again, like all audit procedures, a verb, a what, and a why. Verb would be an action. What would be a document or a process? And why would be the purpose or the assertion, right? All right, let's take the example of the first. Completeness. All right, I have lost it. Okay, completeness of trade payables and accruals. All right. Let's write down certain procedures and you're going to check whether these procedures are correct. So the first, compare the current year payable balance with last year to investigate unusual differences. Can anyone tell me whether my substantive procedure is correct or not? Can anyone tell me, using the procedures, using the benchmark that I've given you above, can anyone tell me the substantive procedure that I just wrote, is it correct or not? If it is incorrect, tell me what mistake have I made. Come on, Muzammil, Serish, Sarah, tell me if my procedure is correct. Everyone, check it. I don't have to check accuracy, Zainab, because that's not the assertion I'm trying to test. Sarah, it is for completeness. Unusual? No, it is a word. All right. This sentence, by the way, is correct. How are you going to know? Come on, everyone, pay attention. This sentence is correct. How? Compare, being the verb. What? Current year with last year. Why? To investigate unusual differences. You could write to investigate omissions, and that's going to be correct as well. You could. Another substantive procedure would be, all right, everyone pay attention, to re-perform supplier statement reconciliations with payable ledger to identify possible omissions. Again, you can check this yourself. How? It starts with a verb. It tells you what you're checking. Reconciliations with payable ledger. Why? To identify possible omissions. A verb, a what, and a why. Now, can you start with the auditor should? Specifically, in a substantive procedure, no, you can't. You have to start with a verb. Can you mention to identify or to verify completeness? Yes, you can mention to verify completeness. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Yes? Serish, the answer to your question is yes. All right. So, in this substantive procedure, again, I have mentioned a verb, a what, and a why. Can I mention the assertion here? Absolutely, yes. So I can amend this to write re-perform supplier statement reconciliation with payable ledger to verify completeness. And that would still be correct. Please remember that any audit procedure that does not mention what you're checking or does not mention why you're checking it is absolutely incorrect. You do not have to write like that in the exam. You must always, for your substantive procedures, ensure two things. Always, and I'm just going to open another file to mention those two things. To write your substantive procedures, number one, it should be relevant to the assertion. So this is the first mistake that students make, writing substantive procedures which are irrelevant to assertions. Number two, it should be a complete audit procedure. How do you write a complete audit procedure? And often students end up writing incomplete audit procedures. It should have a verb, a what, and a why. So this is a technique that is similar to TOCs and substantive procedures. Always, whenever you're writing audit procedures, that could be a TOC or a substantive procedure, it should start with a verb. It should tell you what you're checking. It should tell you why you're checking it. Only then is it a complete audit procedure. If in TOCs, you can't mention the verb, start with the auditor should. For substantive procedures, don't start with the auditor should. For substantive procedures, if you can't think of why, then use the assertion in your procedure. Does everyone know how to write substantive procedures in the exam? Does everyone know how to write audit procedures in the exam? Sarah, you've already covered that. If you look at the knowledge revision notes that have been uploaded, every procedure has been written in relation to a certain assertion, and that's how you have to remember them. Yes, start with AEIOU as in analytical, inquiry, observation, recalculation, inspection. All right, does everyone know now what to do in an audit procedure question? That could be a TOC or a substantive procedure. Yes? No? So that I can tell you finally the technique to answer a risk question, because that is very, very important as well. It is very likely that it will come in your exam. Again, why? Because it is one of the most poorly attempted areas in your exam. All right, Sarah, best of luck when you do cover it. Okay, so everyone, I'm going to move on to tell you the tips to answering a risk question. And then we're done, I promise. Then you can go and you can review the answers at home. All right. So what do you do when a risk question comes, if a risk question comes in the exam? And remember, risk is a topic that you want to do very, very detailed, because this is very likely to be featured in your exam. Why, or how do I know? Because this is one of the most poorly attempted areas in your exam, and this is most likely to be tested again and again until your examiner knows that you can answer this correctly. So risk is something that you should be focusing on. This is a requirement that you should be very familiar with, having done some past exam papers. Describe 7 audit risks and explain the auditor's response to each risk in planning the audit of Centipede Company. All right. So you're going to be answering this question in, again, 2 columns. Audit risk, auditor's response. Let's first discuss the technique to answering this question. Okay. So the technique is, number 1, always when answering a risk question, follow the 1, 2, 3 approach. Step number 1, copy words from the case on to the answer. Similar, always first copy words from the case onto the answer. Number 2, explain the risk. That's important. Number 3, link the risk with financial statements. Remember, if you have missed even a single of these sentences, you're most likely to lose marks in the exam. Number 1, copy words from the case onto the answer. Number 2, explain the risk. Number 3, link it with financial statements. Always the 1, 2, 3 approach. There will always be 3 sentences, at least 3 sentences, when answering a risk question. An auditor's response could either be a TOC, or it could be a substantive procedure, or a change in audit planning methods, or a change in audit team. All right. So, number 1, the auditor's response could either be a TOC, it could be a substantive procedure, it could be a change in audit planning, or a change in the audit team. Any of these. All right. So you can choose one. Remember, I've mentioned or. So an auditor's response would be short and simple. Audit risk would copy words from the case onto the answer, explain the risk, link it with financial statements. Now, how do you do this in the exam? Let's do one example. Audit risk, auditor's response. All right. One. Let's do the easy one. Let's move forward. All right. Let's suppose this. A fifth site was closed down in 2005. However, the building was only sold in 2006 at a loss of $825,000. Now, a building was sold in 2006 during the year ended 2006 at a loss of $825,000. So, building was sold during This is a line that I've copied from the case. Please don't mark your lines or number your lines in the answer. I'm only doing it to show how you're going to answer in the exam. Don't number your lines in the exam. I'm only doing it to show you the technique, all right? Second line, I have to explain the risk. Now, the explanation is the gain or loss on disposal may not be calculated correctly. Now, this is the explanation of the risk, leading to, and this is the third part of your risk, leading to misstatements in year-end profit. Now, an auditor's response. How do you check whether the gain or loss on disposal was correctly calculated? A simple substantive procedure. Recalculate gain or loss on disposal to ensure that correct amount was charged to profit and loss. Over here, verb, what, why. 1, 2, 3. Copy words from the case, explain the risk, tell the impact on financial statements or link with financial statements. 1, 2, 3. Copy, explain, link. Always for risks, copy, explain, link. Remember, if you have not linked your risk to financial statements, you will not get marks in your exam. You will not get marks if your audit risk is not linked with financial statements. Always, always link your audit risk to financial statements or the audit to show the examiner that you know that the audit risk is most likely to affect financial statements or the audit of them. An auditor's response could either be a TOC, a substantive procedure, a change in audit planning, or a change in the audit team. I'm going to do one more. But do you all understand the technique of answering a risk question? Do you all understand the technique of answering a risk question? This is very likely to be tested in your exam. Please make sure that you understand how to answer it. Let me know. All right, we are going to do one more and then I'm going to let you guys go. with the promise that you will get the answers shortly in your email. All right. One more, since we're out of space here. Okay, so going to give the heading audit risk. Response. Going back to the question. All right. So, separate disclosure for remuneration in line with international financial reporting standards. However, in the country in which Centipede company is based, a local legislation requires disclosure of the names of directors and the amount of remuneration payable to each director. So, legislation requires separate disclosure of director names and remuneration payable. This is the first line that I've copied from the case onto the answer. The second line is, this may lead to a breach in law and regulation. This is the explanation of the risk. Also, a risk of inadequate disclosures in financial statements. All right. This is the first part, copy. This is the second part, explain. This is the third part, risk of. Linked with financial statements. 1, 2, 3. Copy. Explain. Link with financial statements. An auditor's response. Review a copy of local law to ensure that adequate disclosures have been included in financial statements. Again, verb, what, why. Verb, what, why. All right. So, an audit risk will be answered using the 1, 2, 3 approach. Copy, explain, link, and then the response. Also, now what you need to make sure is, since we're done discussing the tips and techniques, remember that for your exam or for your preparation, you need to go through the notes that have been provided to you, or you need to go through any textbook that you're comfortable with. That could be PPT, that could be any text, any examiner approved text that you are provided with. Go through those textbooks, and please go through the past exam papers on the ACCA Global website. You must go through the past exam papers in order to ensure a successful attempt this time. Please, even if you know the words word for word from your textbook, it is very likely that you are going to be unsuccessful in your attempt if you have not practiced from the past exam papers. I keep referring to those because at least 8 to 10 attempts should have been done, should have been practiced before you sit for your exam. I'm done with the tips and techniques. If there are any important questions, you can ask, and we're done then. Any questions as far as examiner approach is concerned? Don't worry, you guys should pass. You have to take the exam in a cool, calm, and composed fashion always. One of the worst things that students do, and I can assure you that I've been there, I've done that myself, and it is very hard in the exam to keep your nerves intact. When you are going through the exam, give yourself 30-second breaks. All right, it's okay to give yourself 30-second breaks. When you feel that you're getting flustered, take a break, take a deep breath, calm down, go back to doing the exam. The first thing that you have to do during the exam is, and listen to this carefully, you have to finish the exam. You have to attempt all 100 marks in the exam. Don't think that this is a theoretical exam and it is going to be lengthy. It is of course going to be lengthy. It is a theoretical exam. But if you're writing in a focused fashion, then you should be able to complete the exam. These exams are moderated and they are checked in order to ensure that an average student can complete them. You have to trust me when I say you can complete the exam. If you're getting flustered, then that means you're writing more detail than should be written in the answer. Follow the tips that I've told you. Copy, explain, link. Copy, mention the impact on the business for deficiencies. For substantive procedures, 1 line. All right? You have to finish the exam. The second most important thing is not to get distracted by the multiple choice questions. So read the scenario carefully and please practice from past exam papers. Normally, those charged with governance is the board of directors. Sarah, the answer to this is sufficiently given in the revision notes that have been uploaded. Go through them and any questions should be answered there. No, Sarah, the 3 to 4 past exam papers are absolutely insufficient. They're insufficient. Last minute tip, Muzammil, lots and lots of practice for audit procedures and the 1, 2, 3 approach. Verb, what, why. All right. Thank you very much, you guys. I'm going to take my leave now. And the very, very best of luck for your exam. Bye-bye.